Hello, real life. My name is Vanessa Farish, and I'm the worship director here. And I have the great honor of doing this little interview with Brenda Euston. She is our hospitality director here at Real Life, and she is amazing at what she does. And we were having a conversation this week, actually, as a staff about what things we might need to address during this very difficult season of coronavirus for so many people. And Brenda actually brought up the fact that so many people might be struggling with depression at this time, maybe a recurrence of it, or possibly maybe feeling some of these feelings for the first time. And so Brenda shared with us that she has struggled with depression and was kind enough to offer to share with everyone else what she's been through. And Brenda, I know that you, as the hospitality director, by definition, are the friendly, warm, smiling face that receives everyone in, makes them feel comfortable, entertains them, makes them feel good and happy. And it occurs to me that probably people have no idea that you've been struggling with some darker feelings. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to hear about that. I know I personally always think of you as somebody who's smiling almost all the time. And it's always very outgoing and very friendly and warm. And so I was personally very surprised to learn about this. So can you share with us what depression is for somebody who might not know or might have it confused with something else?
Sure. Yeah, I think the main confusion about depression is people see it as sadness, but it really isn't just sadness the way most people would assume. Everybody gets sad from time to time, and that's normal. It's part of the human experience. But depression is something more than that. It's a mental illness that I know affects thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. And it's something that is a lot deeper and heavier than just a general sadness.
And I think that's an important distinction to make, especially for people who know someone who suffers with depression. There can be this tendency of like, oh, just snap out of it.
Right.
Just watch a happy movie, think positive thoughts, and like get over it, basically.
Right.
But as you said so perfectly, it's not sadness, it's a mental illness. Can you have the J.K. Rowling quote in front of you? Because you shared that quote with me before, and I think it's so great.
Yeah, I do. I love this because it really kind of encapsulates what I felt at times and what other people might feel when they're experiencing depression and don't necessarily have a way to describe it. Mm-hmm. So J.K. Rowling, in a quote about depression, says, "It's so difficult to describe depression to someone who's never been there because it's not sadness. I know sadness. Sadness is to cry and to feel, but it's that cold absence of feeling, that really hollowed out feeling." So that really, in a nutshell, kind of describes what people I know I've felt, what other people might feel during a depressive state. You described me in a really nice way as very happy and smiley almost all the time. And as far back as I can remember, that's who I've always been at heart. Like I really try to find joy in everything, and I'm easy to laugh at jokes, and I love people with a sense of humor, and that is true. That is who I am at heart. But there have been times in my life that I have been incredibly low and felt like I couldn't find that joy, which was really, really frustrating for me.
Well, let's talk about that. So when did you first discover or were diagnosed or had, this feeling that maybe something was wrong beyond just sadness?
So after my daughter was born, which was almost 20 years ago, I just wasn't feeling right. And months went by, and the way I described it to my mom was that I just didn't feel like myself. And I couldn't, whatever the feelings were, I couldn't snap out of the funk that I was in. So I went back to my doctor and sought medical help. And I was diagnosed at that time with postpartum depression. And I thought, oh, that totally makes sense. It's very common. I'm sure that's what it is. And she prescribed a medication for me, which seemed to be somewhat helpful. And I tried to get back to my normal life. I went back to work, and I really proceeded to continue to fall apart. And, I would get to a place where I felt okay, and then I would kind of relapse. And it was just this cycle that I was in. And I kept thinking, oh, it's just postpartum depression. It'll pass. And, a few years went by, and of course, I was no longer a new mom again. And things just kind of got progressively worse. So I went and sought the help of a therapist at that time. And that's when I was diagnosed. And what kind of exacerbated this postpartum depression for me at that time was right after my daughter was born, we found out that she had a heart murmur. And she had an incredible pediatric cardiologist who did surgery on her when she was just 5 weeks old.
Wow.
And her surgery was successful, but the experience for me was so overwhelming, and I didn't have a way to process everything that was going on inside. I kind of just put my mom hat on and was very strong and stoic throughout the whole process. And then afterward, it just...
Well, that's more than postpartum. That's a traumatic event.
Right. Yeah, very much so. So that really, like I said, that wasn't the cause of my depression. It was definitely the catalyst for this cycle that I was in.
And caused you to seek treatment, it sounds like, because it got to a point where you couldn't tolerate it anymore. It was affecting your life too much.
Yeah.
So you said when you got diagnosed with postpartum, you were prescribed medication, right? But that was not enough.
Right.
But at least allowed you to plow through, maybe be more stoic, get the work done that you needed to get done, but yet there was still this deep underlying feeling of not being yourself, like you said.
Right. Yeah. And anyone who battles with depression can relate to the incredible fatigue that goes along with it. And that's the part that has just, it can be very debilitating. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm a sleeper. I love to sleep. I'm not a morning person or a night person. I kind of function midday for a good 12 hours, and then I shut down. And it really doesn't matter how much sleep I get. It's never enough. Mm-hmm. So, and that's just on a good day. So when I'm in a depressive state, it's really, really hard for me to just get out of bed and get my day started. So right now, in light of what we're dealing with, with the stay-at-home order, it's been incredibly hard for me to just get started on my day. And luckily, my husband is incredibly supportive and helpful, and he has been sweet enough he comes in when I'm sleeping in the morning at whatever time I tell him I want to get up, and brings me a cup of coffee and just kind of leaves it there for me, and then comes back 30 minutes later with another cup of coffee. And then once I'm through that second cup of coffee, I'm actually ready to kind of drag myself out and get started on whatever I need.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's wonderful that he's so supportive.
Yeah, he really is.
So this period of time is obviously affecting you, like you said. How are you dealing with that? So your husband's bringing you coffee. Yeah. I guess a better question, how has your faith helped you on this journey? Therapy was incredibly important. It sounds like medication was important as well, and those two going hand in hand were helpful to you. But since we're talking to a congregation of our church, I think one of the things we want to make sure people know is that therapy is not ungodly, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can be incredibly helpful. Medication is not ungodly. It can also be incredibly helpful. But there are also faith, some ways that your faith can help you as well that you articulated to me earlier. So I'd love to hear you kind of share about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, During a really low period that I experienced a couple years ago, I found myself really praying in ways that I had never prayed before. And I was at such a loss, as I mentioned before, to really find any type of joy, no matter how, deep I dug, I couldn't find it on my own. So I would pray just for God to hold me close. And I mean, I was almost pleading to him just to carry me through this because I could not do it on my own. And that during that time, really, it was really all I could do was to pray. And I learned during praying that way that I learned how to depend on myself less and depend on him more. And that was really hard for me to do. And I know I'm not alone in that. I know a lot of people, yeah, but I have always been very independent and self-sufficient and strong. So for me to surrender and say, I've got nothing, I need you to just do it all, was huge. And it really was a turning point in my faith. And I'm really thankful looking back now. I'm so thankful for what I went through. And while I can't really discuss the details of my experience, what I can say is it really broke me, what I went through. And I think I needed that. And we can't appreciate the hurt and the pain that we're experiencing at the time. But now looking back, I see that God really used that time to for me to grow. And I really am thankful for everything.
Wow. It sounds like you were able to experience his nearness in a new way. Like if you're saying to God, please hold me. And it sounds like he did. You were able to experience him holding you together and then also just being with you, which many of us can't experience until we are at the breaking point and need him because we can't do it on our own. I love how you express that. It's a hard truth, but it is a truth. We're created to need him.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because most people, including my family, see me as a pretty positive and happy person. And I know that even though God was holding me during that time, I had absolutely my fair share of moments where I just couldn't hold it together. And nobody really knew what to do with that because people hadn't seen me like that before. Mm-hmm. So even though he was holding me, I was still falling apart because that's what I needed. That's what I needed to do at the time to really get in touch with all the different parts of who I am and to experience emotions like I really had never allowed myself to do in the past, and to kind of rebuild from that.
And the fact that you are perceived as so strong and have that history in your family of being the strong one, and I know you love to be perceived that way because that is a part of your personality. It makes it so much more important, and we're so much more grateful. I am so much more grateful that you are sharing this vulnerable side of you with us now in the hopes that other people will identify and say, that's me.
Yeah,
I,
thank
I,
you.
I feel the same way.
Thank you.
For these other people who might be listening, who might have that thought, this is me, I'm relating to what Brenda's saying right now, or they have a family member who they're sympathizing with, trying to understand better, what would you like to share with them in closing? What's your heart to them?
Gosh, a couple things. Mainly what I've learned through this process is the more you try to conceal mental pain or anguish, the more the burden increases on you, on your family, on the people who care about you. And it creates kind of a callousness. And while it might be a way for people, I know it was for me, to keep the bad stuff out, it also keeps the good stuff out, and it doesn't allow you to live fully. Also, because I was raised in a by very stoic parents, and we really didn't talk about feelings. And I don't blame my family for that. I appreciate the strength that I have from them. But I always perceived talking about feelings or being emotional as a weakness. But it's really not. And getting help isn't a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength. So I want to tell people that, because I know a lot of people, women who are very strong and have gone through a great deal more than I have ever in my lifetime. And they don't really allow themselves to be vulnerable because they don't want to, quote unquote, appear weak or seem weak in front of their children or people who know them. And it's just not. It's just the opposite of that, honestly. And lastly, and probably the most important thing that I've experienced, is that there is hope in the hopelessness that we feel. And like I said before, we might not see it at the time, and we might not feel it at the time, but it's there. I mean, God is definitely behind the scenes doing work in us. And it can be painful, but it's really important. There's a quote that I love, and it's anonymous. It's an anonymous quote that I saw on Twitter. And I want to share this because I think it's so beautiful. Let me take a look here.
There are some good things on Twitter, everyone.
Absolutely.
Sometimes.
The broken will always be able to love harder than most, because once you've been in the dark, you learn to appreciate everything that shines. And I think that speaks to me on so many levels, and it's so true. It really, really is.
Mm-hmm. I think it's kind of like saying too, you learn to love yourself when you learn to love the broken parts of yourself.
Sure.
And you can love those broken parts in other people too. So, Brenda,
absolutely.
I always knew you were amazing, but now I think you're even more amazing as you've shown us these other parts of yourself. You are that much more lovable and interesting to me now. You're a fascinating person, and I thank you again for being so vulnerable. And I know this will bless a lot of people. It'll definitely bless me.
Thank you, Vanessa.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and have a wonderful day.
Bye.